Arsenal rubbish trap game talk to go top of the table. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name's Elliot, Timothy Blackman on Twitter, Yank Gunner. Trap game? Who would call it a trap? I mean, all right, maybe it was a little bit of a trap. It wasn't a trap game. You know what? Who cares? We won. We are top of the league. Say we are top of the league. We're going to dispense with the chit-chat because we have Clive for a fixed period of time today, but we got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to talk about the Brentford game. We're going to talk about the City Liverpool game. We're going to talk about the Porto game. And then we play tomorrow. So it's fast and furious right now. And then, I don't know about you, but as good as the Premier League title race has been, I have just been longing. I think longing is the right word. I think that's what we'd all say. Longing for just some international friendlies. You know, who are Greece playing? Who are Spain? Are Spain playing France? Germany's playing France. I mean, I want these international friendlies. So we're going to go deep on the international friendlies at the back half. I'm kidding. Why are we doing this? Anyway, silly stuff, but it has to happen. All right, I'll dispense with the chit-chat, but with two things. We will have an instant reaction tomorrow following the Porto game. We now live stream them so you can watch them at full time, and then the video is available after. So if you like video versions, you have that available. And then one other thing to tell you, Phil Costa, who you've heard on our pod many times, a wonderfully talented human being, his pod launches during the international break, and we definitely want to support him and what he's doing over there. Okay, enough of that. Tim's on Twitter, @Dominator. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
And Clive's on Twitter, @ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Clive, bravo. Good work on the overlap. Way to represent Arsenal. I loved the comments referring to you as articulate and intelligent. I thought it was a nice change of pace from your pod contributions.
Thank you very much, Elliot, for your support as always. And so, yeah, it's an interesting experience, and I think there'll be another one. So watch this space.
Bit of a culture clash, with the sort of some of the content creator celebrities that were there, and their whole milieu and how you do it. But I obviously who's this bloke talking multisyllabic words and keeping his tone level and even. And yeah, anyway, it was good. I enjoyed it. So I want to start with the emotional component of this because I think we haven't had the chance to do this in a while. And Clive, since we have you for a limited time, I'll let you get the first words in here. 2024 has just been a breeze, basically. Even the Liverpool game, as emotional as it was a pretty comprehensive victory when you look at it. And since that time, no one's really been close to us at all. The Porto game, you and I were there. It was very flat, never really turned into an occasion. It was a gut punch. But there hasn't been one of these probably since the Luton win, which was away. And at the Emirates, it would have been the United game, I think, all the way back at the beginning of the season. Did this take you back a little bit to that Bournemouth game? Not quite as dramatic, not quite as big a hole we had found ourselves in, but what was it like for you to be back into a cauldron of emotion where the clock is ticking, you're looking at the clock, you're looking at the score, you're wondering where the goal is going to come from? How big a release was this compared to some of the big moments we've had in recent months and years?
Yeah, interesting game, right? So watching Liverpool City on Sunday, you could see that game develop. And you can see Liverpool literally put City into the washing machine, couldn't you? You could see it where all their control, the things that they are known for, suddenly were disappearing, and they're hooking it on, helping it on, trying to get away from their goal. And that's what happens in football. That's what's so beautiful about football, right? You can get drawn into things that you don't think you could do. And we know about that at Anfield in particular. Tim, you've seen far too many, so I'm not gonna take you back to that pain, mate. But what I will say is that Brentford, tip hat to them, right? They seem to know every single one of our deepest fears. And it's as if they were preparing for this game for 6 months. That's what it felt like. Thomas Frank was obviously thinking, if I can beat Arsenal, I'm going to get a big job because maybe my time at Brentford is over. And he planned for us. Every detail was planned. They had a front two. They wanted to get physical. They gambled on the fact that Arsenal would say, yeah, well, you give us your front two and we're going to defend with a two against your front two. And we're going to fight and bite and challenge, right, for every single ball. So that was a contest within a contest in itself, right? But very important to our play, because if we had 3 against 2, we wouldn't have had the ability to have overloads elsewhere. So very important. Then they also did things with our goalkeeper. Obviously, they knew they were the one team that were going to benefit from the instability of a goalkeeper selection. But not only did they put him under pressure on crosses, that I thought he did fairly well at, they blocked him off to try to stop the quick counter-attack. So every detail had been thought about. Second ball retrieving, second efforts into the box. And this was the game last year when I started to think about how we were playing off the ball. Remember, Elliot, I kept banging on about double pivot and banging on about off the ball play. It was this game that triggered me. because they went long and they basically fought pretty well. But in this game, to see the difference in our approach and maturity and physicality to pick off a team that understands our weakest points, I thought was excellent. And I just thought we fought them really hard, really on the second ball, and then maintained an intensity level that they couldn't manage. The goal was a gut punch. I tell you now, I am more excited about our potential after seeing this game, because this game was the games that really worry me. Long balls, straight balls, bouncing balls, and I thought we managed it really, really well and then came out on top.
Yeah, and I should also point out, as part of their strategy, this was, I think, both Brentford games this season, I think, are two of the bottom 5 games in the Premier League this season for ball and play minutes. So, first of all, good prep for Porto. I think that's valuable, right? How to keep flow, how to keep focus, how to keep creating chances in a game that's disrupted in that way. And we did manage that. But Tim, I want to roll back to the beginning, because I think sometimes what can happen in a game is that there can be a major shift in the dynamic, and then all you remember is the sort of end stage dynamic, not the beginning. Let's go back to the beginning, and we'll talk lineup a little bit, but I think that'll come into play more as we get into individual performances. This was a dominant performance early. This looked like what we've been doing in 2024. We cut them open. We created chances. We didn't quite finish all of them, which will happen. We did finish one of them. White, who had a sensational game, 2 assists in this game, a nice little sort of, I guess it was an out swinger right from the top of the box, almost the Ozil position, to Declan Rice in the center forward position, right? We expect him to pop up. And then Kai Havertz put through, I think, for a chance he should finish, that probably makes the game safe, from a just brilliant Jorginho delivery. Jorginho was fantastic in this game, and I almost wonder if his removal wasn't just to get another attacker on, but to keep him just that extra little bit fresher for Tuesday. Although who knows if Mikel would have been thinking that in the moment when we're level and needing to win. But so I'm curious to get your perspective on really the first 47 minutes of this game before the dynamic shifted a lot. Because I thought lost in the narrative and the drama of this game is that we looked just as dominant and just as good as we have in prior weeks for the first 45 minutes or so.
Yeah, absolutely. At halftime, from the stadium, I tweeted, "Throw it in the bin and start again." And part of that was about it. The second half's going to be a different game now. It just is. But another part of that was kind of just keep doing what you were doing. Like, it's a setback, it's a mistake, but play the same in the second half. And basically what happened, we kind of did play the same. And obviously it's different. The momentum's different. The rhythm's different. Brentford have something to hold on to. They have even more reason for, the kind of epidemic, the great cramp epidemic of the second half, which strangely didn't affect them in stoppage time, when cramp usually affects you. They didn't see much of that.
Can I stop you on that? Because it is one thing that's been going around on social media that I think is brilliant. I really do think if a team has been guilty of time wasting all game at 90 minutes, the captain for the other team should get to go to the ref and say, we opt not to play the stoppage time, shake hands, and the game is over.
Yeah, and also playing the extra stoppage time, because I think they put up 7 minutes and then there was an extra 2 minutes, which I know is within the timekeeping, but it does feel...
And there was a VAR check, I think, that accounted for most of that.
Yeah. And so, I thought for the first 40 minutes we were really, really good. Like you said, dominant, squeezing them. And look, Brentford are a horrible team to play. Brentford, I used to say this about Sean Dyche's Burnley. I really like them, except when we play them, which is probably how every team in that kind of bottom half who doesn't want to get relegated, that's how they should be.
Yeah.
They should be the team you hate to play. If you look at Brentford's results against City this season, they only lost by the odd goal a couple of times.
Yep.
Against the big teams, when they set up with that back five, it's quite a good formation for them, I think. And I wonder, because what Brentford do is they play a back four, and then when they play the top six, they play a back five. I really wonder if they should just play a back five all the time, to be honest, and keep that 5-3-2. And because they keep two strikers up there, they give you that problem. And Wissa's come into the team with Mbuemo out, and he looks very dangerous in that role as well. So they give you problems, Brentford, but they didn't give us any problems in the first half, basically. We gave ourselves the problem, and it was... I heard Clive say this on the instant reaction, but it was very much like the Liverpool FA Cup game, right, where you just dominate and it's 1-0 and you deserve to be 1-0 up and you're kind of thinking about the second goal and all of that. And then, the bomb drops on you just before half time. But thought we looked really, really dominant again. I think particularly when you're playing, look, the thing we've added in an attacking sense this season is height. We score 2 headers, and we've scored 3 goals against Brentford this season, all headers from crosses. And Brentford is not the team you would peg for Arsenal to score headers against. But that's one of the things I really love at the moment, Elliot. And again, I tweeted this after the game. Like, I love that Arteta doesn't somehow feel embarrassed or proud about hitting crosses to someone to head it in. Like the way that Arsenal have a lot of different faces, a lot of different ways to win a game, a lot of different ways to score a goal is really, really good, because I really think being an ideologue or thinking certain goals are beneath you is a stupid way to think. And I think we kind of been imprisoned by that for quite a while. So, ultimately I thought the first half was like normal Arsenal, basically. And then the second half was always going to be a bit more of a scrap, bit more of a fight. I think pretty much everyone in the stadium knew at half time this is either finishing 1-1 or 2-1 to Arsenal. Like, it's clear at that point we weren't going to steamroller them. Whereas if it had been 1-0 at half time, I think we might have been looking at another 3 or 4-0 here.
I really do. I think so. I mean, I think if Kai scores, this turns into maybe an absolute hammering. And to be fair, Brentford are missing quite a lot of players, but any game that gets reduced to the ball being in play so infrequently and so many stoppages is going to test your ability. And to Tim's point, when you're not as flow-based, one of the ways you can level the playing field is with set pieces or throwing a cross into the mixer and having your giant left 8 headed in, which is what we did. I'm going to disappoint some listeners right now. We're not going to do ref discourse. I just don't want to. It's our podcast. We don't have to. I think Arsenal had 2 shouts for penalties, and they weren't penalties, and so be it. And I think there was some contact, and Kai went down. Are you going to send somebody off for that? You can't send somebody off for that. I think if referees are going to err on a side of how they referee the game, erring on the side of not making the critical call is fine by me. If you want to call fewer penalties and you want to call fewer red cards with the caveat that we're excluding violent conduct there, but like a second yellow that sends a guy off, I'm fine with that. It's the other thing I don't want. More things being penalties, more things being second yellow cards.
I agree, but can I say there, and look, as someone who believes there is no such thing as a good iteration of VAR, I think they're all flawed and they're all rubbish. But this one's especially frustrating because you get the delay. Don't check it then. If your position is we are absolutely not giving it, don't check it and don't create the delay. So now we've got the worst of both worlds where we get the delay and we don't get the right decision.
Yeah, that is a good point. If you're going to take the time to look at it, then you should probably get it right, Clive.
Yeah, sometimes with referees, what we do is we focus on decisions which are all based on interpretation. But a referee's main role is to manage the game and to manage the flow of the game. And as in Porto, a referee made so many stops in the game, had so many conversations with players after every single event. We ended up with 50% in ball in play time. And this is very, very similar. So Rob Jones, he's got a record of actually giving out the most cards in the league. So everything's an event. Everything's a stop. Everything's a chat. And what do we don't want as Arsenal Football Club? We don't want that. We want the ball moving. We want to get people tired. Every time there was a collision, they stayed on the floor. And he allowed that to happen. To be fair, he added the time on, but he's allowing that to happen. Now, this needs to be a conversation for referees, how they manage these moments. It's quite in your rights. If you want to slow a game down, that's absolutely fine. Then you need to come off the pitch and leave the pitch for 30 seconds, and they'll soon stop it. What they were doing, they were going down, they were staying down, and then rejecting treatment, which means they got the delay, they were able to stay on the pitch. And that needs to be corrected. That's a hole in the law, right? So unless you can say to the management...
They did kick it out in a touch once, And we didn't return the ball. And I loved that because they didn't ask for treatment. Yeah.
Absolutely right. And it's a hole in the law. And so you've got to say before the game, if you go down and you're down and you're going to call and we stop the game, you are now obliged to leave the pitch. I'm going to call the trainer on. And so he has to manage the flow of the game, right? So people focus on decisions all the time. And we're always going to disagree on decisions. Like, look at McAllister at the weekend. I actually thought McAllister ran into the situation to make sure he can initiate contact. That's all he wanted to do was create a decision, right? And so for me, I'm so glad the referee didn't give it. That's what should happen in big games for the last 5 minutes. But it's not about it. It's about flow management, game management. To the millions of people who are watching, we don't want to watch people on the floor holding on to various parts of their body parts and then recovering like Lazarus. Right? That's what we don't want to see.
And I'll just say the other thing to your point about events. I think that's a good call out. That the referee sort of wants to be in the middle of this. I don't think I've ever seen a referee do so many, have so many moments where he blew the whistle to have someone retake a throw, retake a free kick. No, not over here, over there. You were 1 yard off. Go back. Just stoppages and stoppages upon stoppages. And that is us not doing referee discourse. But yeah, my point, and I think the reason I want to avoid it is you got a lot of mainstream media trying to make the discourse about this game somehow that Kai should have been off. As if that's the thing, that the team that wasted half the game with stoppages, that could have had 2 penalties against it, were robbed because a soft second yellow wasn't given to send a guy off in a game where sending Arsenal down to 10 men would have been nonsense. And oh, by the way, does anybody in the mainstream media want to be deprived of seeing a full-strength Arsenal go to the Etihad and have a chance to go toe-to-toe with City? So come on. And we'll talk about that with respect to Gabriel in a moment. But Clive, let's talk about our center forward stroke 6, stroke left 8, Declan Rice. I mean, this is something that we talked about recently. The change that you get when you move Rice up a line. I think you give something away in recovery runs. I do. I think you can be countered on a little bit more. But what you get in terms of pressing and keeping a team squeezed in and a threat in the air, if you want to put crosses in and have a different way to play, I think Declan Rice is not getting enough credit if that's possible. And the reason I say that is, you have to think about the kind of football he was asked to play under David Moyes at West Ham. Sit deep, shield the back line, carried into acres of space or kick it long. Nobody within 12 yards of you, 15 yards of you when you get the ball back. Cover all the ground and maybe just try to progress the ball any way possible. And now, tiki-taka 1-2's first time in the box, edge of the box, win the ball back high up the pitch, change your game completely. And it looks as natural as possible to him. So I love this game from Declan Rice, and I think he's maybe not getting enough credit, not for how good he's been, but for how good he's been playing a way that is a transformation of what he was asked to do previously. I thought he had a great game, obviously, and he gets the opening goal.
Yeah, on Rice, so we were doing our scouting, and I remember I said, I'm not sure if we should make him into a Steven Gerrard or make him into a Michael Carrick. Then I thought to myself, don't worry about that. It doesn't really matter because he can do both. And that's why you're paying 100 million quid in a player. I think this is a manager thing, really, and he deserves a clap because he has managed to add different ways of playing into our team this season that we've not all appreciated, not all agreed with, but I think he does exactly what I'd hope he'd do, which is maximise his resources. So we used to play our 3-2 build up, 3 at the back, Ben White on the right hand side, Sleep in the middle, Gabriel left. Zinchenko rolling inside with Partey, Rice, doesn't really matter, right? So that's our 3-2, then we do it like with our front 5. And then recently when Kivior coming to the team, we went more to a 3-2, but slightly differently, with White coming a little bit more, Kivior nice and comfortable on the outside, and go from there, no drama, right? So, but now we've gone to more of a 2-3 build-up, with 2 at the back, playing 2 centre-backs that we know and love, and we've got Kivior, Jorginho and White tucked in the 3 narrow. Jorginho sitting there with his carpet slippers on. These 2 6-foot monsters next to him doing all his running. All he's got to do is receive the ball, point his shoulders the right direction, and dink the ball about. And when it comes to transitions, unprotected. Suddenly he looks world class. And White is further up the pitch, just looking around, surveying and exploding hand grenades. Sorry, Rice is up the pitch, looking around, exploding hand grenades wherever he feels like it. Ben White is doing 3 roles in the game. Rice is doing 3 roles in the game. Odegaard doing 3 roles in the game. Just got to open our mind up to the art of the possible and stop putting numbers on people's backs and just say at this phase, they're in the build-up phase. In this phase, they're in the attacking phase. Can we get close to each other so we can create combinations? Can we move the ball quickly? They're the principle by which we play. When we lose the ball, we make sure collectively we attack it. We attack it the quickest route. If you're the closest, attack it with everything you've got. Smash into that space, delay, at least cause a delay to allow the organisation behind you, or counter press and we go again. So it's wonderful to see players not just fill a role that a previous player filled, but you create a shape so that player can now thrive. That's an improvement from last season, Elliot, and how we ended the season. When players were asked to do jobs they couldn't do, and we just did it anyway. I think it's a massive step forward. So credit to Rice, who I knew could do this. He's a good player. But credit to the manager for maximising our resources.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think if you look at players who are playing roles that have evolved and are different than maybe what they might have anticipated and how they have thrived in those roles, we'll come on to Kai Havertz, of course, who's one of them. I think Ben White is one of them who was fantastic in this game with 2 assists. And overlap, sure. Come inside and be a midfielder, sure. You get on the edge of the area and deliver crosses for assists, or overlap and deliver crosses for assists, sure. I think there are a lot of players having to adjust the way they play and doing it brilliantly. And, it's a huge credit to Mikel Arteta. I think one of the things that I came away from this game feeling really, really good about, and it was certainly validated then watching City and Liverpool a little bit, by the way, is just the talent of our center back duo and the way they manage the game and whatever the challenge the game is, especially given that I think there are times when defenders have the kind of game they like. You know what I mean? In the box, heading away, physical, sometimes goalkeepers like that, under siege, making saves. I think it's difficult to be a defender or a goalkeeper, which we'll come on to as well, for Arsenal, in the sense that the team's all the way up the other end of the pitch. You're all the way up the other end of the pitch. You're doing very little traditional defending, and we've done so little traditional defending the last 2 months. And now here comes this big physical threat, someone who really has it in for you, a guy who's playing like he has a chip on his shoulder. Maybe because he wanted to come to Arsenal and Arsenal didn't go get him in January. Maybe because he's finding out Arsenal isn't going to come get him in the summer. Maybe because he wants to make us regret that decision. And to be fair to Tony, I thought he had a pretty good game in some respects. I mean, that shot from 40 yards out that Ramsdale saves, like that's a brilliant piece of individual creativity and execution. But Gabriel and Saliba really handled the physical challenge in a way they didn't in previous meetings with him. And I think they deserve huge credit for it. And the guy that I think I want to focus on is not Saliba, because he gets plenty of love. It's Gabriel. I'll admit, Tim, when Gabriel was on the yellow early, I was terrified. All the thoughts are going through my head. Not just that we could go down to 10 men, but that we could go to the Etihad once again without our first choice center back pairing and have to play that scenario out. And when you consider the physical battle that Tony's going to create, trying to play that game clean, right, without getting your second yellow, but without just yielding the physical battle, right, saying the way I'm going to avoid a yellow card is I'm not going to be physical with this guy, that's really difficult. I thought he matched him physically while on a yellow card, matched him emotionally when they fronted up to each other, when there was sort of bad blood between them. He found the right line to stay engaged with him, but not go over it, never put his head into him, never did any of the stupid stuff that we've seen players do. How impressed are you, not just with the way he and they managed the physical battle with Tony, but to do it on a yellow card and find the right way to strike a balance there?
Yeah, exceptional. I'd just add on Rice quickly. He did play the advanced role for West Ham last season alongside Souček, so it's not alien to him. But yeah, on to Saliba and Gabriel.
Shows my ball knowledge in the mud, as per. No worries, all good.
just exceptional, because Brentford do play 2 strikers. And even though, they bunker in and defend because they play a 5-3-2, there can't be many teams who do that, who come to the Emirates and play 2 up front. And so they give you that problem at the other end by keeping those 2 up. And it's a real traditional kind of, kind of strike partnership, really, albeit Vissa kind of comes from wide. But that's very much in Gabriel. He comes from the right. because they're kind of split strikers, really. Tony goes over to Brentford's left, so our right. Visser kind of runs in from that right channel, and that's really hard to deal with. So it's not just that they leave two up front, but they split those strikers wide. So that pulls your centre-backs quite wide apart as well. And I think first off with Saliba, I think we've all talked about this. This was the one game last season where maybe he got pushed around. And to me, he played like a guy who knew that and wanted to prove a point. And when you saw the way he bodied Tony, for example, that's what convinces me of it. I'm not sure how much Saliba is a kind of, excuse my language here, a fuck you guy, because he defends like so calmly and coolly. But that moment that's what that was. Like that tells you that he's been wanting to play, because obviously when we played Brentford earlier in the season, Tony wasn't there. I think he's wanted this game for a while. And he wanted to prove that point and was like, okay, there's one game that's a little scar in my mind, and it's that one. And we've seen that generally from Arsenal this season, right? I think we've seen them in certain games, for example, go, this team or this player left a little scar for us and we're going to give it back. Gabriel, I think the thing with Gabriel, not just an exceptional defender, because usually like your centre-back pairings, you could say, if you're being really broad, Saliba's the clean shorts guy who sweeps up and Gabriel's your like Martin Keown. But actually, I think what makes them both so good is they've both got a bit of both of that. It's not hugely defined in that sense. You'd say like Gabriel's a little bit more bad cop, but not totally. So I think he kind of avoids those maybe Koscielny moments. So when you had Koscielny and Mertesacker, a brilliant centre-back partnership, but it was very defined that like Mertesacker had a very defined set of attributes. So Koscielny really had to kind of play up the aggressive thing. And I think that's why you got the odd red card, the odd penalty, the odd own goal. Whereas here, I think there's both of them have a bit of fire and ice. And I think what you're seeing from Gabriel as well is just the benefit of rhythm of games when you play every minute of every game and you know your body, you know the rhythm of the game, you know the kind of the intonation of the game. You get exposed to all sorts of different types of game. Like we all saw that Sheffield United game, right, where Saliba and Gabriel are basically on the edge of their penalty area. And, this wouldn't have been that different, but they've really got threat going the other way. So you've really, really got to be plugged into that. I thought they were both sensational. Brentford have 3 chances in this game. One is a shot from 45 yards. That's not on the centre-backs. The goal is not on the centre-backs. It's just that one header. That one header on the back post, which really maybe Kivior should have been with. That's the only time Brentford really properly caused us a problem that was anything to do with the centre-backs.
Yeah, I mean, they're very, very special. And I think that this is a different kind of challenge, and they handled it. By the way, Tim, you're saying Saliba's not a, quote, fuck you kind of player. He might be a fuck you player with his comments, though. I don't know if you saw any of his post-match interview stuff. He was saying, like, they asked him about the Kai dive, quote unquote. It was like, man, I didn't see it, but I did celebrate the goal. I was very busy celebrating our goal. He gave it the full Arsene Wenger. I didn't see it. I loved it. And so, yeah, it was a great day for them. I want to ask you a slightly different question, Clive, but I imagine you would be pretty frustrated if you don't get a chance to speak on Gabriel and the center back performance. So I'll let you put a final word in there. Anything on them that you want to add?
To be honest, I think Gabriel's been our best defender since the moment he arrived, and on raw defending. And the only bits that I do rate his hunger for every single moment in the game. It's like every ball that comes towards him is like the last ball that's ever going to come towards him. And he just defends it for his life. And it's so interesting to watch him, the way he reaches around people, tears through the back of people, stays tight, just fights you. In your team, you need a guy that if it went into the car park, you're going to be all right. And he's our guy for that. And that's a bit Sunday league, but for people that have played football, you know what I mean. You need someone to make sure you don't get pushed around on the pitch, and that's it. And he's perfect for that role.
So there was one big moment before the Ramsdale moment. I mentioned it. It's the Kai miss. I mean, it's always hard to say miss, right? Like, it's hard to score a goal. You'd like him to score there. There were a couple other opportunities. I guess actually Ramsdale, who we'll come on to very shortly now, did a beautiful job, long throw out to Leo. And if that's Martinelli, I think it's a goal. But Trossard can't quite race away. Ball gets under his foot a little bit. He has to check back. Then there's some confusion. I don't think we even got a chance out of that. But the Kai one, I really do think if he puts that in the back of the net, as I said, this goes on to be a laugher. Your thoughts on that opening, and maybe just a word on Jorginho, who I actually think taking him off was the wrong move, although I understand why we did it. But so much of our penetrative passing came from him. He played Saka in brilliantly between the center back and fullback once. He played Kai in there. He's really added something in terms of line breaking, verticality, through balls in behind. And yeah, it's a great chance he creates, and Kai just can't find the right finish.
Yeah, so what we're doing at the base of midfield is slightly different, as I said earlier, with the 2-3. So he has a defined role. So what we've done, we've split him and Odegaard. So Odegaard's not coming deep into the box anymore. He's staying higher, and he's been much more of a last shot type threat, which we wanted to do against a deep block, right? So that makes perfect sense. So you create somebody who can see the pitch and can dink it and chip it and clip it. And then you make sure you have your small space player who's a genius in small spaces and soft feet higher up. And so that actually works for me. I don't quite agree, my friend, that taking him off was the wrong decision. I think it was the right decision. We've got a massive game on Tuesday, and there's no way he can do those two.
Can I stop you just for a second? Just real quick. If the argument is that it was to protect him for Porto, of course, I accept that. I meant in terms of from a tactical standpoint, and I'll expand on that in a moment. But that's what I meant. But if it's to protect him for Porto, yeah,
I think from a tactical standpoint, it's brilliant because what we did, we brought Jesus on, created another player in a central part of the pitch, and moved Kai Havertz literally 6 yards to the left. When it didn't really matter, we just basically played second forward. So what we did, we added a second forward. We're 1-1 at home in a game we have to win. When the other two protagonists are playing the next day. And what we did very smartly was move Declan Rice back to protect and then moved the emphasis of our attacking game further forward with an extra body. It was perfect, absolutely perfect. And also the substitution of Trossard with a more penetrative player was also perfect because Trossard was playing a little bit narrow, crowding maybe spaces out. We didn't have an overlap of this day. And so again, it's recognition of resources. Adding Reece Nelson's threat of speed pins their back five and creates room and lanes to run into in central areas. And so I really agreed with how we approached it. And to watch Jesus play, Elliot, was actually quite interesting. The amount of times he gets under that ball when it's a long exit, I don't know how he does it. He's playing against monsters, and he just seems to be under the ball, and they can't get around him. And then he can hold it and control it and move that in. I got a big feeling for him on Tuesday night. Got a big feeling for him. You can just find him. And so yeah, I agreed with how we set the game up. I agreed with the substitutions and the timing, and now we can have a fresh look at the Porto game. And you're absolutely right, Elliot. I tell you now, you could not pick a better league game for us to prepare for a Champions League game than Brentford at home.
Yeah. And so do we have to lose you, Clive, by the way? Is that where we're at right now, roughly?
I think so, yes.
Okay, so we're going to mute Clive, which I would never do otherwise. We're going to turn off his camera. We'll say goodbye to Clive, who will be on tomorrow and probably every day between now and the end of the season, so no worries there. My only point, and this is the beautiful thing now, Tim, I can respond to Clive's point about the tactical switch without him being here to tell me I'm wrong. No rebuttal. Is simply that I thought we went through a period after Jorginho came off where we really struggled. We brought on the extra attacker, which I totally understand, and we moved Declan Rice deeper, no stress there. But I actually think we lost some service into that front line area, and that actually Brentford was able to hold us at arm's length a little bit during that period. Now, granted, they were going to the ground so much, there's so many stoppages, hard to say, but I just think the way Jorginho was picking the lock a bit, we missed that, and we'll come on to that. I'll give you a second to talk about that, and then we got to come back to the Ramsdale thing, obviously.
Yep.
So any quick thoughts on Jorginho? And do you think it was with an eye towards Tuesday? I mean, I kind of struggle to believe that in a 1-1 at home in a game you must win, that Mikel was prioritizing Tuesday. But maybe they had a plan and he was only going to play that many minutes. That was the plan. End of story.
Yeah, I think it was more about the game situation. Don't get me wrong. If we'd been 3-0 up, I think Jorginho would have come off as well, because I'm pretty sure he's going to start on Tuesday. I think it was just as simple as we need to get an extra forward on. I'm not taking Odegaard or Havertz off. Yeah, maybe you can take Trossard off, but then I think you potentially unbalance yourself a bit. For me, I don't kind of agree with you. I do agree with you. Maybe we lost a bit of stability. I think we kind of corrected when we brought Zinchenko on. And really, that probably should have been what we'd done. Because again, if you think that I think that what Jorginho is doing is essentially slightly replacing what Zinchenko does. I think that should have been done at the same time. That's my take.
Yep, I think that's right. Okay, so we'll row it back then. And there'll be more Kai talk, obviously, but let's talk about Ramsdale. So he had the two good throwouts, one that was just a bit too long for Trossard, who I thought was a little below his best. In fact, frankly, on Trossard, I don't think his best performances have come in left wing, to Clive's point about it being too narrow. I think he really likes to bring the ball inside early every time, and that doesn't always suit us. He also doesn't have that breakaway pace. But aside from the two throws, I think Ramsdale just looked like a guy who knows what he's supposed to do with the ball, but also knows it's not what he'd ideally like to do with the ball when it's at his feet. And even before the error, I don't think he looked particularly comfortable, kicking out and doing the things that he was asked to do. And, if you look at it, I think it's pretty easy to see, even just in the data, that, that he's struggled with his passing. And so it's not a surprise to me that he made an error. I mean, his long passes, his launched passes, he completed 6 of 24. So that's 25%. But his regular passes, he was not particularly effective with either. I think those were 44% complete. So that's not great if you're playing it shorter. Prior to the error, did you feel he looked a little bit uncomfortable with his distribution?
Yeah, a bit. It didn't enormously strike me, I must admit. But then I guess my eye's quite attuned to what a Ramsdale kind of game is. And it'd been interesting to see what the approach would have been with Raya in goal, because my instinct is, for everything I just said about we scored headers against Brentford, all of those have been late arrivals into the box. So they've all been by, central midfielders. Like that's where Havertz was playing when he scores his goal. My instinct is, when Brentford are playing a back five of like 6'5" defenders, that you probably don't want to launch the ball that often, even if you have got Havertz up there. But it's a strange one, isn't it? I think I saw on my way into the ground, I didn't watch the clip, but I think it was Karen Carney potentially on the Sky coverage, and I just saw the headline of the clip, which was, Ramsdale shouldn't try to be Raya, he should be Ramsdale. And that's quite interesting thinking about that, because in one respect he was, and that was kind of the problem with the stuff that you highlighted. But I think with the mistake, I think there's so much to this mistake. Basically, I think there are three potential eventualities, three potential reasons for this mistake. None of us know which one is right, except for Aaron Ramsdale himself. One eventuality, or one kind of timeline, as it were, is that this happens to even the best goalkeepers sometimes. I saw Jay Harris, who covers Brentford for The Athletic, saying that Wissa does this a lot, and he's nearly scored a couple of goals doing that this season. Although, again, my instinct is then to probably say that Arsenal knew that and probably told Ramsdale, don't dither, because this guy will accelerate. But there is... I'm aware I keep saying there's a timeline somewhere, but I like that phraseology. There's a timeline somewhere, right, where Ramsdale has played every game this season, has been our player of the season, and that just happens to him. That happens to Alisson, it's happened to Edison, it'll happen to them again. And maybe he's just unlucky that it happened to him in the one game he's going to play. That's a possibility. Not attracted to that myself, but it's a possibility. Second possibility is that Ramsdale has had a tendency to blow up at this point of the season. I don't think he's ended either of his 2 seasons at Arsenal very well. And we have seen this in about March, April from him before. So there is a possibility that it's that. I think the most likely is it is a bit of rustiness, and a little bit of rustiness baked in with the fact that if he has that half-second hesitation because his Ramsdale brain is going, launch it, but then he has that other voice in his head going, Raya wouldn't launch it here, and you've lost your place to him. So you need just that half-second's hesitation can make the difference. Confidence as well. I definitely think that that's been an issue because Ramsdale's been quite bad in all the games he's played this season. Maybe that's harsh, but I'm thinking West Ham, Carabao Cup, he was bad. The first half of the reverse fixture against Brentford, he was really bad. In both games, he has improved a lot in the second half, which is why I'm more attracted to the rustiness, confidence kind of timeline, as it were, because Ramsdale, let's say he's played badly in 80% of his games this season from a very small sample size. I don't believe that's who he is. As much as I prefer Raya, and I think I said that pretty early before all the cool kids were saying it, I don't think that's who Ramsdale is. I don't think he's a guy who messes up that often. And so I think it is playing on his mind a bit. I think the fact that he improved in the second half of both these games is kind of a tell that it's a little bit of a rhythm thing. And my kind of, I tweeted this, and I think lots of people saw this as me trying to have a really hot take or viewing it through the prism of it's Raya versus Ramsdale and one of them must die kind of culture war.
Both of them are going to die.
We all are.
Exactly.
And so, I think one thing people should probably learn about me is I'm a bit of a goalkeeper apologist. I get a lot of flack from Arsenal women's fans for doing this as well. But remember after that City game with Raya did that and he got away with it, and I was a bit of an apologist for him on that. But I think with Ramsdale, that strikes me as a rhythm error, strikes me as like Jorginho against Spurs. Do you think Jorginho makes that mistake now? Now he's got 30 games under his belt? No chance. And so there's a bit of a continuity thing. But my hot take is, Elliot, and I don't feel hugely strongly about this because I didn't say it at the time, and I don't think it's like a massive glaring error, but we made some subs at Bramall Lane on Monday night that were about giving guys minutes. And I wonder, particularly since our manager chose to raise this himself of his own.
I wish I had subbed a goalkeeper.
Yeah, I do wonder whether, why doesn't the goalkeeper count in that? Ramsdale hadn't played since December the 11th against PSV. Should we have brought him on at half-time against Sheffield United where, he's not going to be massively busy, but he'll get a few back passes like that. And frankly, if he messes one of them up at 5-0, it doesn't really matter very much. And I appreciate that's all hindsight. And like I said, I don't feel like I'm not saying it's Arteta's fault he made that mistake. It's Ramsdale's fault. But I do wonder whether Arteta might have that thought in his head and think, do you know what? Maybe I should have given him the second half against Sheffield United, and then maybe this doesn't happen. I don't know. Maybe it still does. So I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, I'll say something quickly on it because it actually doesn't matter at all. And I'll explain what I mean about that. But so first thing, Tim, I don't have a lot of sympathy for the rust excuse. I get it. And it may absolutely be the case. But the only reason is I've seen Ramsdale make these kinds of errors with the ball at his feet when he was playing every match. Some goalkeepers are goalkeepers and some goalkeepers are footballers. And I think Ramsdale's a goalkeeper. And I think that's why we went for a footballer. I think, David De Gea is one of the great shot stoppers we've seen in the Premier League. He cannot kick a football. And that wasn't that important until it was important. And he had to go. And, I'm not saying Ramsdale can't kick a football or what happened to him is because he has no footballing ability. But look, the touch is a little big. He doesn't have the confidence to play it out to Saliba, who's wide open. He hesitates and he gets caught. And he had a couple other similar issues in the 8th minute under no pressure with options to play it short. He kicked it out for a goal kick, at the other end of the pitch. Now I'm sure Mikel said to him at halftime, just kick it long. It's okay. You know what? We'll find a way through, because I think he was much more decisive, less indecisive, if you take my point, in the second half and just went long instead of letting the worry get to him when he needed to. But I mean, if you told me we were going to have a game where we're under the caution, face 30 shots, I'd probably want Ramsdale in over Raya. Ramsdale also looked, not to hoist him with his own petard, but I'm going to. He went on a podcast and said the reason he gets involved with the away fans or the opposition fans is he struggles to concentrate for 90 minutes of a football match. I think it's really hard to be a goalkeeper for an Arsenal that doesn't face shots and doesn't have a lot to do. And then all of a sudden the ball's at your feet and you're like, oh, wait, I have to play football now. And so if concentration is an issue, well, it's about to be halftime. You're already thinking about your orange slices and there you go. You've just conceded. This is the thing I think about this, though. We know Aaron Ramsdale is in the future for Arsenal. And the reason I almost not love that this happened, that's the wrong way to say it, but appreciate that this happened is Aaron Ramsdale wound up making a couple massive saves that helped us stay in this game and ultimately win it. He can do a knee slide at full time, which you gotta love. I mean, you gotta love goalkeepers, man, to have the gumption to do that. Do a knee slide, right?
To be fair, that the Brentford fans were giving him a lot of stick,
Yep.
and that's where he was when that.
Well, they
goal
should be
went
careful because he may be coming to Brentford based on the hug and the long chat that he had at full time with Thomas Frank. But what I was going to say is, Tim, we get to have two things. We get to have a big emotional win that he contributes to as almost a send-off for him because he may not play for us again, barring, unforeseen events. But we also maybe get one final reminder that the decision to move on from him is justifiable. So it almost helps us lay to rest whether we've made the right decision. The fans can just be like, you know what? Yeah, probably right. But also give him a great send-off, cheer him. He gets to win and have a nice emotional moment. We loved this guy when he came in. He gave us high moments. I think people feel a great affection for him. He doesn't go out on a low. He gets the win, and I do think the save on Tony is brilliant. I think the save from the header is really good. He has to make those saves. He does make those saves. And then we can all clap him, celebrate him. His Arsenal career moves on and he, ends maybe quicker than we had hoped, but we can have it end maybe with the fans feeling just a little bit more consistently that it's the right decision. Is that maybe just a reasonable read on the situation there?
Yeah, it feels a bit like closure, doesn't it?
Yeah,
and
that's a better way to put it with one word.
I already think that Raya settled, I think, and I think people started to see, and some of those arguments that sometimes take a while to percolate, like he suppresses shots and things like that, and there's a reason he doesn't have to make all these massive saves. Very, very David Seaman coded, and it does really remind me, and fans of an older vintage will remember when John Lukic was replaced with David Seaman, and John Lukic won the league with Arsenal 88-89. And I really remember George Graham's what he said about, because he got a lot of flack for that. He got a lot of flack when we brought in Seaman from QPR, and everyone's going, "What? Why are we doing that?" And George Graham, he put a real underliner on it. He said, "I think John Lukic is the second best goalkeeper in the country. I just think David Seaman's the best goalkeeper in the country." And it was very I don't think he was a problem. I'd have been happy for him to be my goalkeeper. But once the guy I think is slightly better came available, that's what I'm going to do. And I do think this is maybe valuable for us in our journey as fans as well, because and listen, I completely understand. I'm a bit with footballers when they go or when they're on their way out, I'm quite unsentimental.
Yeah.
But I would never have a go at anyone for loving an Arsenal player. Never. I kind of don't think that means you should hate the guy who comes in or be I kind of didn't like that I felt like people were getting at Raya. Almost like that kind of "you're not my real dad" type stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of don't like that, but I'll never ever have a go at fans for loving a player and for thinking, this kind of sucks. But I think it's probably valuable for us in our journey, as it were, to understand this is probably going to happen. Guys we like and value, they're probably going to fall by the wayside, and it happens. It's happened. Every league title we've ever won, there have been guys who've been bombed out in service of winning those league titles that people liked and people responded to. George Graham got rid of loads of them when he came into Arsenal, and everyone was like, what are you doing getting rid of like Charlie Nicholas? And then we win the league and no one cares anymore. So, maybe for us, this is a good like preparation for the fact that it might happen again, and it probably will happen again this summer and next summer, and maybe we'll be a little bit more prepared for that when it does.
Yeah, and sometimes these players leave, and you're like, oh no, how are we letting this guy go? And then you're like, oh wait, actually they're shit. Like when Alex Song went to Barcelona, or when Alex Lab went to Barcelona, or when Thomas Vermaelen went to Barcelona. In fact, now that I think about it, there's a theme there.
It's a shame they're broke now, isn't it, really?
Yeah, sell the many of our players we don't need. But then it can also be like Xhaka. Xhaka went to Leverkusen. He's going to win the title, and he's been one of the players of the season in the Bundesliga. And it's a devastating loss for us. And you know what? It allowed us to evolve into maybe a better team than we would have evolved into if he had stayed. So sometimes, even when you lose someone as influential and as good as that, it opens a pathway. I mean, Liverpool used losing Coutinho, who had been one of their best players in some respects, to forge the pathway to becoming the team that ultimately could win a title and win a Champions League by spending the ridiculous money once again that Barcelona spent on him to build their sort of quote unquote super team. So I think it's a long way of going to say that like Ramsdale will move on and we will move on. And here's the irony. It doesn't mean Raya will wind up being the right guy. Like that is, I don't think you could say that's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. But I think what is proven beyond a shadow of doubt is that moving on has been okay and will be okay. One player that we have moved on to, and it's interesting, we just talked about Granit Xhaka. We talked about how Declan Rice has been able to play some of that role now. And you talk about a change in dynamic of the kind of player you have in a role. And Kai Havertz, and between Kai Havertz and Declan Rice, we kind of have the Xhaka replacement. And we're getting a lot of output from both. I thought Kai Havertz was man of the match. Even with his miss, he scores the winning goal, but he did so much more. And it was frustrating at times this season trying to defend Kai Havertz for that. He's doing things you just don't see. People hate that. Even if it's true, people hate that because it feels very hipster and I know better than you. And, oh, the data says this. Well, how many goals does he have? Like, it's great now that he's getting the stuff that really is measurably important to go with the stuff that I still do think is important that maybe is harder to measure. I had him as man of the match. He was given, I believe, man of the match in this game. And how great did you feel for him to have his song sung that loudly, that forcefully, ringing around the Emirates? He has become a very unlikely hero, but a hero we needed. We knew what we were getting with Rice, with the money we spent, and he's been everything and more. I don't think that we knew with Kai, and it certainly wasn't an instant hit, but it sure feels like value now. And I think that turning into value has maybe been the catalyst for the project to go bang, as has been often quoted,
Yeah, I think you said during the summer, this is a signing that has to work. Like it feels very pivotal. We've lost a pivotal player from the team who played every single game. And, we knew what we were getting 7 out of 10 every game from Xhaka. He really became Mr. Consistent in that role. And it was all in his muscle memory. And I've said many times, I think that was the best role for him. And what actually happened in his Arsenal career is we spent 5 years playing him in the wrong role. But with Havertz, yeah, of course, it took time. It was a slow burner. We were squinting to see it. I think Arteta clearly saw it. And we're beginning to see that realised now. And I listened to the conversation you and Paul had about it on the instant reaction. And I completely agree. Like the biggest thing you can say for Havertz at the moment is, there were games where he was on the bench early in the season. That happened quite a lot, actually. He was, and that shows you that he wasn't doing exactly what we wanted him to do. Now it's like he's one of the first names on the team sheet, and it's almost immaterial to me whether he's the 9 or the 8. Basically, like I don't care. I think he basically does the same thing in both roles. He scores that goal once he's dropped back a bit into the 8, and he's not in the left 8 there. We talked about, you look at that first goal against Brentford earlier this season on the back post, coming in from like the left 8, as it were. I think that's the goal a lot of us envisaged. That wasn't where he was scoring this goal. He was over to that centre forward play. He was right over to the right, the front post, attacked that. And I just think he and Rice as well, because they both score headers in this game. They both scored big headers this season. If you look at Arsenal's attack last season, it was small, right? It's quite small, right? Jesus, Martinelli, Saka, Trossard, Nketiah, Nelson. Not a lot of height there. Not a lot of guys. Jesus. He's not a brilliant header of the ball. He's good at being physical and holding the ball up. But do you remember that game at Brighton? Of course you do, when we played Brighton in May and we got done 3-0. But actually our tactic there was to go long. And actually I thought it was a good tactic and we did it quite well. It's just that once Brighton went 1-0 up, at that point of the season, our heads were gone and that was it. But we were going long to Jesus and counter pressing for the second ball. Imagine doing that now with Havertz. Like, that would work much better, as good as Jesus is in that scenario. So now what we've got is a little bit of height and presence up there. It's another avenue to goal. And Havertz has got all of the technical kind of expertise to ball in this team, as it were. He's got the touches and brilliant off the ball as well. I think we always saw that bit, that's harder to see, but I think that was always there, that kind of off the ball, the pressing, the hooking, the very impossibly long leg round to win the ball back. I think that was always there. The flourishes and the confidence and the kind of, you look at the way he's finishing now, like that's an emphatic header, some really emphatic finishing. We were not seeing that earlier in the season. Actually, the chance he misses, that felt more like October Kai Havertz.
I should say, by the way, before people get really mad at us, that was ruled offside.
Yeah.
I don't know that it would have stayed offside, but if I keep calling it a miss, I think people will get mad that I not at least acknowledge it. Had it hit the back of the net, it may not have counted. And in fact, it doesn't even count as a shot because the offside was given. So I don't know if it would have stayed offside. But
yeah, I think he was on. So I think that would have been a lengthy VAR check.
Yeah. I think he was on, but
even like the movement there is really fantastic, and the way he's working that left channel. And what I really liked about this game, as well as I think in recent games, it's been the combination of him and Trossard that's worked really well, where defenses don't really know which one's playing in which position. But Trossard's on the pitch, but obviously in a different position. So it was him this time. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, I very much agree with Paul's take, where for me at the moment, he has to start every game. Don't really care whether it's 9 or 8, but there's no chance he's not starting on Tuesday, put it that way. And there's no chance he's not starting at the Etihad. And we wouldn't have said that a few months ago.
And definitely at the Etihad, given that if you think about where Mikel did trust him, first time ever at center forward for us, it was the Charity Shield, right? Community Shield center forward against Manchester City.
And another valuable thing about this game is I think Havertz is likely to start up front on Tuesday night, just because I think he'll want Rice and Jorginho, and obviously not going to. It's just a way of getting them all into the team. So that Jesus sub and Havertz dropping back, certain we're seeing that again on Tuesday. So it's good to give that a bit of a dry run as well.
I was raised on the Invincibles, but really the era that I probably remember more clearly because I could watch more of the games and just see more of it was the era that followed, right? The post-Invincibles era. And we had midfielders like Cesc and Flamini, Santi Cazorla, Francis Coughlin. We had some diminutive attackers. We had some diminutive center backs. Thomas Vermaelen wasn't a big, tall guy. We less said about Mustafi, the better. But like the Invincibles, when I go back and look at them, they were giants. This is a team of giants now. Ben White is a fullback. Kivior is a fullback. Saliba and Gabriel. You want to come into midfield? There's Declan Rice, right? Kai Havertz playing up front. There are big men in this team. And I think the physical presence we bring to a game now is very different. And I do think there's something to that, Tim. And I wouldn't say Kai is like a bruising player, but he does use his physicality. And I do think that what a defense has to do when Declan Rice is crashing the box and Kai Havertz is crashing the box and there's a cross coming in or the ball is out wide, I think it's very different. I think it is very different. I do think that the size of this team has added something. And if we want to be the, quote, best out of possession team in the world and we want to press like mad, when there's someone that blocks out the light that's over 6 feet tall, hovering over you with long legs that just seem to be extending and extending, it's real hard to get the ball out. And I do think that having both of them up there in that front line or that area creates a very different problem for the opposition to solve. At least that's my thought on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad that some of those clips have been going viral of like the Arsenal team, standing in the tunnel. Like, I'll be honest with you, I don't really look at those clips and think there's that much to read into them at all. I reckon you could clip something like that up of the team 5 years ago and it would probably look about the same. But what's important is that people think that. That's what's important, that these sorts of things are going viral now and people are saying, yeah, this isn't a team. Yeah, exactly. This isn't a team that you want to mess with. That's more important. And that's probably just part of the halo effect of being a good team, is all of a sudden people see things like your physicality and all that. Because you're right, like Havertz, he's big. He's not scary, but he's big. And sometimes that's enough. But then when you surround him with like Gabriel and Ben White shithousing at every opportunity and you know, and Declan Rice thinking, oh God, how am I going to get the ball off him? He's just going to run through me. You know, that is important. And yeah, exactly. Creating that aura is very, very important. But I just think it's so important that Arsenal have this guy where it's like, do you know what? We will probably out-football you. Most teams in the league, we will out-football you, no problem. But if we are forced to go long, we can do that as well. So it's like we can get out in different ways, and I think it's so important to have that variety. And to your point, to have those guys that perhaps make a defence step back and think, actually, all right, Havertz might. Well, he runs off the shoulder very well, but it's like, yeah, but if they go long to him, I need to be here to try and compete for that header, or when he chests it down, and you know, just making teams just back off you a little bit so you can have your defenders on the halfway line. I think it's great. And I think the fact that the midfield's so adaptable now, where you've got like Rice, yeah, he can be our 6 or he can be our 8. We can put Jorginho in there, put Havertz up front. We can, you know, as we did in this game, we take Jorginho out, you know, just having that carousel. As I've described it, we don't quite have it in the forward positions yet. We're one player light before we properly have that, but it feels like we have it in midfield. It feels like we have that kind of, we can start with Jorginho and we can take him off. It's no problem. We can drop Rice, or you can do it the other way around. You can start without Jorginho, and if we're 1-0 up with 15 minutes to go, bang, he comes on. You can't get the ball off of him. I just think that Arsenal are, basically, the way I would phrase it is Arsenal can give you more problems now. And I think Rice and Havertz are a huge part of that. And Jorginho too, who's another, didn't arrive much before those guys.
And it is great that, you know, we're getting healthy at this time. I think it's so funny how, you know, winning things obviously changes the way people talk about you. But what does everyone say about Manchester City? Here they come. Get to January, they're healthy, they win every game, they go and they win the title. Look at Arsenal. We got to January. We're getting healthy. We've won every single game we played this season, and it has this year, and it hasn't even been that close. We're doing the City thing, and we're doing it in the way they would. We're dominating teams. We're destroying them. We're shutting out the light. We're restricting their chances. We're not giving them hope. And we're doing it with a team that's starting to round into form, not just 1 through 11, but beyond that. I think it's beautiful. I love that Kai Havertz is flourishing. And ultimately, the fact that he is versatile, you know, I think it's a weird stick to beat him with, to be like, oh, he did wind up being a number 9 after all, didn't he? Well, no, he's not. He can drop in. He can link the play.
It's no different to Rice, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not.
He's a 6 or an 8. Who cares?
He's
one
weird
in
stick.
both.
Exactly. It's a weird stick to beat a player with, wow, you found a place to really influence games and help Arsenal win on their way to being top of the table with 10 games to play. Yeah.
And sorry, the other interesting thing about Havertz, to your point about rounding into form, that's kind of the useful thing as well. In terms of this time last year, we started with all our forwards on form, and then maybe a couple of them started to drop off. We lost one. and this happened to City last season, right? With Haaland, it took a little while to adapt to having Haaland. Now, granted, he was still scoring loads of goals, which makes it easier, but they got to this stage of the season. It's like, no, right, now we've got Haaland and we're adapted to him, and that helps you finish the season stronger. So maybe there was a use to some of that pain in the first half of the season, because now we're in a situation where we've only just found out how to use Havertz, and that makes it less likely that opponents are going to adapt in time before the end of the season, as happened to us last year.
So interesting, right? To end a game like this too, when we have to win it, and you look at who's come off the bench, and it's Gabriel Jesus, Thomas Partey, and Alexander Zinchenko. That's a far cry from what we were bringing on, a few months ago. And Tommy's back in training, and it's rounding into shape. That's for sure.
Yeah, and of course the other thing is as well that we shouldn't underestimate is that winning recent games 5 and 6-0 and getting our guys off at half time and on 60 minutes probably helps us to have the energy and the resources to go to this right to the end as well.
I mean, it is crazy too when you think about Kai. It's easy to think of him as like a journeyman who's, been at a few different clubs and we're trying to resurrect his career. And he's Reece Nelson's age. You know what I mean? Like it's not that weird to think that we could be getting Kai for the absolute best football he still has in him, which I think we will, and that this guy could be the limit for him. Since you brought up Haaland, we can probably start to shift to City Liverpool before doing a Porto preview. I will just say we didn't mention him, so I just want to mention him. Martin Odegaard, right? Like it just goes without saying. I think this was a sort of peripheral game for Saka, which is fine. Like, he can't be the dominant force in every game, but
Ben White did it for him this time.
Ben White did. He really did. You're right. I mean, they really focused on Saka, and we did a great job of finding Ben White, and Ben White did a great job of finding the pockets of space. But I just want to give a nod to Odegaard, who again goes just about 90 minutes. I think he created the most chances, the most shot creating actions, certainly in the game, and it's just become standard for him to play at a level that is, at the absolute tip top for any midfielder in the league right now. So kudos to him. So, all right. So you mentioned Haaland, so we can shift to City Liverpool. The first thing I think I'll say, Tim, is just, I thought it was a fabulous game to watch.
Yep.
It was a really fabulous game to watch. And that maybe there's something in that should give us hope as Arsenal fans. Because I think for the neutral, our games probably aren't a hell of a lot of fun to watch because we've kind of become City. We just don't give anything away. When I look at this game that City played at Liverpool, and I look at the game we played, even forget at the Emirates, at Anfield, and what we restricted them to, and City's vulnerability, I think there's something really big to take away from this game, Tim. I think both of those teams have a bit of a glass jaw, and maybe, just maybe, we're thinking of City as something that they aren't anymore. Do they look uncharacteristically vulnerable to you? Because even in the United game, by the way, at least in the first half, there were 3 different times there was a United player just racing in on goal, and Martin screwed it up, obviously, all of those times. But there's a vulnerability there that I have never associated with City, and maybe things are changing now.
Yeah, I think they are more vulnerable to that ball in behind, and I kind of think that maybe Kyle Walker's lost half a yard. And that's what we've been so used to seeing in those big games. Kyle Walker always plays because no matter, you can be 30 yards clear of him and he catches you up and takes the ball off you. A couple of times in this game, I couldn't see him on the screen when Liverpool broke away, or there was a time where he tried really hard to get a yellow card. I think him and Bernardo Silva both had a chop at someone, probably Diaz, and just completely missed. And so I think, I think this summer, City have got to replace him, and that's going to be really hard because he has a very specific skill set. Don't get me wrong, they've got all the money in the world. They'll probably find the guy that can do it. But he's got a very specific skill set that's been particularly valuable in big games, and I wonder if he's lost half a yard, which would make sense. He's 33 years old. They nearly let him go to Bayern last summer, so I think there is a bit of that. I think what I'd say, but I think you're right. I thought it was a fabulous game, and there were 15 minutes where City looked imperious and 15 where Liverpool looked imperious, and a draw was probably fair over the 90 minutes. But what I'd say, I guess encouragement-wise, first of all, Liverpool haven't won any of these head-to-heads, with City and Arsenal. They've played them all, and this was a draw at the Etihad as well, wasn't it? Or have I misremembered that? So Liverpool haven't won any of these head-to-heads. I mean, don't get me wrong, they've drawn 3 of them. So,
Arsenal are the only team to have won any games against the top 3.
Yes, yeah. So
of the three.
So we've beaten them both at home, drawn away at Liverpool. One thing I would say is that the beginning of the second half, where Liverpool, do that thing where, as Clive says, they put you in the washing machine and it's very, very difficult to get out. I think I saw that Man City were way below their usual pass accuracy, like their worst of the season. In this get still, I think it was still about 81% or something, which is still quite respectable. But for City, it's way below where they usually are. And we got into that washing machine in the first 15 minutes of the half at Anfield. But I think we got out of it. I don't think City got out of it. I thought the second half was nearly all Liverpool, albeit City have 2 really good chances, probably their 2 only good chances. But even to that degree as well, that shows that Liverpool were a bit vulnerable on the counter. I'd say, though, in mitigation for Liverpool, the players they're missing, for them to be able to do this, if I was being balanced and I was saying, we play Man City and we don't have Saka, Saliba, Rice, Ødegaard, I don't think we have much of a chance, to be honest. So,
no,
fair play to them for that. But yeah, I think you can perhaps drop the ball in behind on this City team, not easily, but maybe better than you could a year ago. And I thought it was quite interesting they took De Bruyne off as well. And
I was going to bring that up. I think that tells you a lot about their inability to control the game and their need to get another pure midfielder on to try to shore things up.
Yeah, and De Bruyne didn't seem happy with that decision either. So let's hope that leads to an irreconcilable fallout. But I also do wonder if they're just protecting De Bruyne fitness-wise as well, because he basically played the last month of last season with a torn hamstring until he completely exploded in the Champions League final, and then they lost him for the first half of this season. So I do think they're beginning to kind of manage his minutes a little bit, and that's, again, they've got all the money in the world, they'll probably do it, but they're going to have to find another De Bruyne. That's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy for them. So, I think you're right. I think we're not tilting at windmills, but we're squinting a little bit. Neither of us are saying either of these teams are going to be very easy. We could very, very easily finish 3rd. I think that's still where most people would put us, and that's fine. I don't even think there'd be a lot of shame in that, because these are 2 amazing teams. But clearly, we've got to try and look for those weaknesses, and particularly when we play City in a couple of weeks.
I think you have to tip your hat to what Klopp is doing with Liverpool. There's just no avoiding it. And Van Dijk is playing kind of at that level that only Van Dijk has hit recently. I mean, I think Saliba's in the conversation, but Van Dijk is at his absolute best. And I didn't think he had this level in him anymore, and he clearly does.
And Salah as well. At first, I was a bit surely you can start him for this game. Surely you can try and nurse him through it and perhaps let him cry off the international break. But actually, when he came on, I was he looked a bit Thomas Partey. Do you know what I mean? It was oh, that's not Salah. That's
except
really
for
not
that
Salah.
one phenomenal chance he laid on for, was it Nunez? And then Nunez plays was it a reverse? I can't remember specifically, but just a sensational sort of diagonal through ball that he played. Look, they were fantastic. They created 2.5 expected goals against Manchester City in this game, which is really remarkable. And they're doing it without Alisson, who's the best keeper in the world. They're doing it without Trent Alexander-Arnold, who's the best attacking fullback in the world, although you could argue maybe he's one vulnerability too much for them to tolerate, and that's something they'll have to think about as they move forward. They got guys like Endo playing in midfield against Manchester City. And I think one thing that's really changed about City, we used to think about City as not just a 1 through 11, but a 1 through 18 of absolute dominant players. But you look on the bench and it's Sergio Gomez, Gvardiol, who has not done anything there, Matthias Nunez, Oscar Bob, Rico Lewis, Ruben Diaz. They brought on Kovacic and Doku, and the Ederson injury update is not good. It may be that he's out alone. Now, look, that could just be Pep playing mind games, and he's back for the next game. But he said it doesn't look good. Could be a long absence. So they lose Ederson. I don't think he's Alisson level importance to them, but he's important. I think that this is kind of like the Rocky versus Ivan Drago moment. He's not a machine. I think they cut City a little bit in this game. And City were hanging on and lucky to get something. And I think it's a message to everybody. They're not a machine. You can have a go. You can get something off them. Now, look, they're still going to win most games. If you told me they win every game they play the rest of the season, it's not like I'd be shocked. But there's something there for teams, and there's something there for us. And my takeaway from this game is kudos to Liverpool and to Klopp and to what they've done there. He's bought some brilliant attackers. He has one great center back, and he's making it work. Well, he has two great center backs. We didn't even have Konate in this game, but he's making it work. And, he's just letting those chaos agents up front do all the work. With City, I do think it's worth pointing out, it's another big game where Erling Haaland wasn't able to have an impact, and he just has that in his locker. If he's not scoring goals, he's not doing much. We've had center forwards like that, players like that. I mean, Aubameyang was one. He was never at Haaland's level, at least not at Arsenal. But so I think that's an interesting point. All I can say, my takeaway from this game was, I don't know what will happen at the Etihad. No one goes there and has it all their way or has an easy time. But there's something for us here, was basically my takeaway. And if we can go to the Etihad and get a result, even a draw, based on form and how all these teams are playing and fitness levels and things, I'd have us as the team to beat at that point, Tim. Is that fair?
Yep. I absolutely think that is. And I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because we saw and heard all of the different kind of variations of what result do you want from this game leading up to Sunday. I think most people kind of fell on a draw, but it'd be really interesting to know what Liverpool fans think about this game. And I guess that would talk about how seriously they take us for whatever that actually matters. I think you're right. I think if we come out of that game without losing, then we're right in there as probably joint favourites, because if you look at Liverpool's next 5 games or so, you could see them taking 15 points, and they've got players coming back, which I think is crucial for them. I think the thing is they've gone through this massive injury spell and they've actually come out of it pretty unscathed so far. And to your point, I think maybe it's because they've had a couple of games to get used to it, but Liverpool looked okay without Alisson. Like, Liverpool looked more comfortable without Alisson than City looked without Ederson. But again, maybe that's just because I've had a few games to get used to it. But and I guess also with Liverpool's style, it is maybe because they're not as much of a. I heard you refer to us as like well-tuned kind of team. Like Liverpool are a chaos team, right? And actually, there's probably an argument that's and don't get me wrong, like that is a quality in itself to be able to create that kind of chaos. But there's probably an argument that maybe you don't need like the technicians, quite like you need them, but you can probably, because this was Klopp's whole strength, right? At Dortmund, when everyone was trying to play Barcelona football and they all discovered they couldn't do it because they didn't have Xavi and Iniesta, Klopp was like, I'm going to play a very different type of football, which probably means I can, it's too much to say carry players, but like it's been a long time since I've looked at any Liverpool central midfielder and thought, oh, we must have him. Like, they have runners in midfield. And again, I'm not downplaying that. But like, I've never looked at a Klopp midfield and thought, oh, he's world class. Like, it's really good players, but you know what I mean? Like, they depend on that chaos a little bit more. So they're probably the team that are best equipped to kind of carry the kind of injury crisis they've had. But I tell you what, best of luck to Liverpool in the FA Cup. Best of luck to Liverpool in the Europa League. They can have both of those trophies with my absolute blessing. I'll cheer them on all the way to the final. Like, I hope they're in those competitions for as long as possible, because I don't hate them enough to care if they win them, and I want them to have as many games as possible.
They should take those competitions as seriously as humanly possible.
And he picked a strong team against Prague.
Yeah. Before we do a quick Porto preview, Do you have that as a penalty at the end of the game? Should Liverpool have gotten a penalty there?
It's one of those. Sometimes, guys, decisions happen where both decisions are right and wrong at the same time, and I think that's one of them. I think it's one of those. If you give a penalty, no one can argue. I kind of think at the same time, and I do think sometimes the gravity of a moment should be taken into account. I think if one of those teams is 3-0 up, that's probably given. But I completely understand and don't think it's wrong if the kind of VAR or the referee thought, you know what, maybe that's a penalty, but potentially if I give this, it decides the league title. And is it enough of a penalty to decide the league title? And listen, Liverpool fans will have no truck with that argument. I completely understand that. But I kind of sometimes I think there are those 50-50 penalties, and I kind of think it's all right to say, do we want to decide the league title this way? Probably not.
So I don't think you can look at that as a neutral. I don't think it exists. I think there are probably neutrals who can look at it. I don't think a City, Liverpool, or Arsenal fan can look at it as a neutral. I didn't want it given. My bias is baked in there. But what I would say is, to your point, I am always going to have more time for the decision not to give a penalty than the decision to give it. If it's close, I would always err on the side of not giving it.
Yeah.
Because I think an 80% chance to, let's say he gets the ball. He does kick. It is a high boot, but he gets the ball. I know getting the ball is not an excuse to then put your studs into someone's body, but I don't think he puts his studs into him. He kind of catches him a little. But here's what I would say. Let's say he doesn't get the ball. He doesn't even kick it. He leaves it. I don't know that there's a chance there. Maybe there is. You don't know in football, but it's not an 80% chance. And I think to turn that contact into an 80% chance is not really how I want games decided.
Completely agree.
But if they had given a penalty, I think you'd be like, horrible way for the match to be decided, but I get it. So I have sympathy for whatever bias you want to apply to viewing that. But we will do plenty on the City game, by the way, and we've got a lot of fun stuff ready for you during the international break and stuff to keep you going. But we got to talk Porto before we get out of here. Game tomorrow. It comes quick. It looks like Martinelli is not in training. It's a deep cut. He was seen in a boot and on crutches in the mix zone after the game. But I've talked to a doctor friend of mine who said, if you have unlimited resources and you're a pro athlete, getting your foot, putting no weight on your foot is the way to handle this so that it can heal up and not open up again. But if that's the situation, maybe he's on the bench and it's break glass in case of emergency. My guess is he won't go. Tomiyasu is back in training, obviously not going to be starting this game, but why don't you give me your thoughts on how you'd line up for this game, and we can dive into a little bit of what we expect.
Yeah, I think I'd be inclined not to chat. I think you could talk about playing Gabriel Jesus on the left, if that's what you want to do. I think we missed him in the first leg, and actually, I think Clive reminded me of that on the Three Big Questions podcast we did for patrons on Friday when we were talking about the availability of players, and a lot of people, not a lot of people, but there's this kind of, Havertz is up front now, we don't need Jesus anymore, and actually we played Havertz up front in Porto and it didn't really work. I was kind of screaming for Jesus, as it were, in more ways than one.
That can happen. Yeah.
But maybe there's an argument about putting him on the left wing. I'd kind of be open to that. I think, though, I would probably keep things as they are for this game and rely on the fact that we've got a stronger bench now, and Jesus comes on, whoever it's for. Jesus comes on for the last half an hour, basically whatever the game state, really, unless it's 6-0 and you want to keep him out of the international break for Brazil. But I'm not sure how likely that is anyway. So, yeah, I think I'd stay the same. The only question, I think Jorginho is going to start this game, so I don't even have that kind of does Havertz play in midfield or up front type thing. I think we'll want Jorginho, Rice, Ødegaard as our kind of midfield three. And like we said, you can't really drop Havertz, so where does that leave him? That leaves him up front. So really, then it's only a question of the left wing between Jesus and Trossard, and I imagine it will be Trossard and Jesus will come on in either of those positions for the last kind of 30, 25 minutes. Can't really see any changes anywhere else unless maybe he decides that this is the game to bring Zinchenko back into if he wants greater control over the ball. But again, Zinchenko and Jorginho together is not a combination I've ever really liked that much. So if you made me bet on it, I'd say it's probably going to be an unchanged lineup. But I wouldn't grumble too much if Jesus is on the left wing. I just don't see that happening.
I think,
and obviously Raya will come in for Ramsdale. I don't think Ramsdale did enough to keep his place in this game.
Not quite. I think if Jesus is fit enough to start a game, I think he should start this game. Let's put it that. I don't know if he will. I think he should. And again, I don't think Trossard was like bad. I don't love him at left wing. Ultimately, I mean, the funny thing is when Reece Nelson came on, I thought he looked good against Brentford. And I think it does show this system is designed to have a stretching player, a sort of direct running player out on the wing. And neither Jesus nor Trossard is that. So if Martinelli's not there, we're going to miss him. I guess the argument is that, you could, there's so many ways you can do it, right? Because I think that this is all a bit of a set of dominoes. If Zinchenko comes in, that's probably in place of a Jorginho. Then you drop Rice back. Then you play Havertz at 8. Then you play Jesus or Trossard at 9. Like if it's Kiwior again,
at left back and Trossard, then you're really bunching up the middle. If you had a Kieran Tierney style left back, like Kieran Tierney, for example, if that was an option, that's probably one I'd go for. Say, okay, Trossard on the left, and we'll have Tierney bombing up outside of him. But we don't really have that left back. So I think it is probably more important to have a stretcher on the left.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'd probably go unchanged, except if he's fit to start, I'd start Jesus over Trossard. Porto will probably try to do the thing they did in Portugal again, right? Which is get the game to be as short as possible in terms of ball and play. I know that there's a perception that, that won't be allowed at the Emirates. Well, I mean, it's kind of down to the referee more than anything, but the Emirates crowd will be loud, and I think we'll put pressure on the ref. But how do you stop it? If they go down, this is the thing that's hard. If they go down under even the slightest pressure, refs just give that every time. I don't know how you stop it. So, how do you anticipate this game being refereed differently potentially, or how we're going to approach their time wasting?
Yeah, I mean, a lot does depend on the referee and how much he's actually influenced by the crowd. That can be a factor. I think one thing, unfortunately, in the end, the one thing we did get in the Brentford game, the referee didn't really stop the game being kind of junked up like that. But the one thing we did get is we got the time back at the end. We didn't want it at that point, but we got it. And I'm not sure you get that in Europe away, particularly when you watch Champions League games, the injury time played is totally minimal. I very rarely see anything in the first Champions League games. 45 minutes, whistle goes regardless, pretty much. So I think you get less time back. I think the other thing as well, of course, we can't stop players going down, deciding they've got cramp on 10 minutes, etc., etc. All we can do is try and influence the ref. But there are things we can do that we couldn't do in Porto. Have ball boys and girls, for example. In Porto, didn't see many of them about that, or rather, they were in row 10 most of the night. They weren't really alert. We'll have our own ball boys and ball girls getting the ball back in play. The other thing I think is easier to do, you're right, you referenced in the Brentford game, they do that thing where they kick the ball out, the guy doesn't go off, and it used to wind me up so much how much Arsenal used to give the ball back in that situation. I'm so glad we didn't. We can do that. That's easier to do. You do that in Porto, the crowd are on your back, that influences the ref, etc., etc. So no, we can't stop it. If Pepe goes down holding his face because he got a bit of smoke in his eye or something, there's not really a lot we can do about that, and that is going to happen. But there are ways around the edges where we can make it a less kind of junked up game. I think we are just going to have to eat that is going to happen. And of course, the other way around it is to score an early goal, and then or go 1 or 2-0 up nice and early, and then they can't really do that anymore. So it's a bit like that question about deep blocks, like how do you pick open a team that's got 9 or 10 behind the ball? Well, you've just got to be patient. You've got to kind of not lose your head about it. And once you do find a way through, they can't really do that anymore. So, yeah, it's going to be a night for cool heads as well. I think at least that part in Porto, we didn't lose our temper in that game, and that's going to be important here as well.
Yeah, I Galeno's in pretty red hot form, unfortunately.
They
Porto,
did Benfica 5-0 right recently.
Benfica 5-0. They won 3-0 on Friday, and this is typical of these other leagues. They say, "Oh, you've got a big Champions League fixture on Tuesday. How about we put your match on Friday, so you have the extra day of rest?" We're obviously playing on relatively short rest. I mean, this is what big clubs have to be ready for. I do think Jorginho has a big role to play in this, but there is a part of me that just thinks if we just handle the long straight balls pretty well, we should be okay. It was really weird, Tim. I thought we looked nervous when they just hit the ball long and straight. Saliba had a really uncharacteristically poor game, I thought, in Porto, in the sense that he let the ball bounce a lot. He didn't take the initiative. And that really allowed them to get the ball in hurtful positions and cause us problems. I don't see that being the case at the Emirates. And I think it's going to be a really, really big atmosphere. Let me just ask you this. Look, I think it'll be an unchanged lineup. Maybe Jesus comes in. Setting that aside, how important is this game? I mean, we are top of the table in the Premier League. If we were to lose this game, not lose this game, but lose this tie, we would then have the easiest run in terms of fixture congestion versus City and Liverpool. I'll have a lot of fixtures coming. I think we'd play midweek once, maybe. While they'll be playing midweek every single week between now and the end of the season, presuming they progress in their respective competitions, which I expect them to. City already have, obviously, in the Champions League. Liverpool essentially already have in the Europa League, and they have easy FA Cup draws. So is this an absolute cannot lose it critical moment for the club? I know Clive feels it is, and I think I do too. Or is there a world where we look back on the title celebrations of this season and say, as painful as it is to admit, a Champions League exit became the foundation for being able to go on and do it?
I think this is an absolutely pivotal game. It's a pivotal game about how we're seen as well. And when you're looking at things like recruitment for the summer, Champions League quarterfinal, semi-final looks a bit better than going out in the round of 16 to Porto. Obviously, we have baggage from the Europa League. From that, I do think it's really, really pivotal. I think it's pivotal about the feeling as well around the club, because look, at this point of the season, that matters. The feeling that we'll go to the Etihad with as well. I don't want that to be a bad feeling either. And I think the other things I guess I would say vis-a-vis Porto's approach. First of all, there is rain forecast in London. On Tuesday, it's likely to rain in the build-up to the game, but not during the game. I think that'll make the pitch a bit quicker. I think the pitch in Porto was borderline, very, very borderline. UEFA should have a look at it. Probably not quite there, but like really, really, they messed that pitch up on purpose. Not going to be able to do that on this occasion, and the pitch will be quicker as well. But I do think this is pretty make or break. And Arsenal's European record in recent years is crap. Overall, it's crap. This is the next thing I think on Arteta's checklist. Basically, he's turned us into challengers, and I think that's kind of not the most we could have asked for, but that's right up to the ceiling of what we wanted domestically, like to be competing with City and Liverpool to the extent that we are. Europe is that's the one black mark on him, on the club. It has to change. Like, I can't be adding this to PSV 2007, Monaco, Olympiacos, Villarreal. Like, I can't be doing that. I don't think any of us can.
And I'll compare it to the last Arsenal team that was this good, the Invincibles. Nobody looks back on the Invincibles and goes, Well, that makes the exit to Wayne Bridge's Chelsea okay. Right now, to be fair, had Arsenal progressed all the way to the final of the Champions League, I think we would have won it that season. I think we would have kept the Jose Mourinho legacy from ever being started. So we can cry about that. But would we have gone invincible? Would we have been able to go all the way invincible? I mean, I don't know. Probably not, right? Probably not.
People will hate me for saying this. I'd still swap it. I'd
For the
still swap
CL?
it. Yeah, for winning the league but not unbeaten and the Champions League. Yeah. Sorry, I'd swap it.
And by the way, I don't think you're necessarily in the minority there, but that's a really hard thing, right? When you look back on history and you say, Arsenal almost certainly, I think if we get past Chelsea, if you look what was left, win the Champions League that season. If you have to give up the Invincibles for that, would it be worth it? Maybe, maybe not. But I don't think anybody looks back on the Invincibles and goes, that's just made the Wayne Bridge thing not hurt. It still hurts me to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason I bring that up is to say, first of all, it's a slightly different situation because I don't think if we get past Porto, we're suddenly the Champions League winners elect. We are not going to be favorites. We're probably not going to be second favorites. We may not even be third favorite. Might be third or fourth favorites. So it's a slightly different situation. But you could convince me that going out of the Champions League at this stage will allow us, with our returning players and our fitness situation, to be in absolute pole position for the league while City and Liverpool are absolutely being rained upon by fixtures. And yet I still won't take it because of our European legacy and the need to build on that. And the need to, you fight so hard to get back into this competition. To go out at this stage just undermines, I think, the importance of getting to this point and the reputation we're trying to build. And I do think, look, we may not win the title. If we don't win the title, but we get to a Champions League semifinal and we played this well, I think people are going to see a beautiful story being written. I do think if we go out here and then don't win the title, anyone who wants to say, well, Arsenal were the best team in the league, they're going to be, the Arsenal that lost to Porto in the CL. So look, external viewpoints don't make the club, but they do influence all of our experiences. Let's be honest, right? What we experience with our mates at the pub or at work or on social media or, whatever it happens to be, even in our households in some instances, it matters. So I think it is a huge night for the club. And you know what is nice about it, Tim? It is a massive pressurized moment. And for a group of players that have had to carry that bottled it thing, which we hate and we hate to even reference, I think it's a lovely opportunity for them to go stomp a weaker Porto and show that in a big moment. Because think of the big moments we've stepped up this season already, right? We beat City at the Emirates. We beat Liverpool at the Emirates. We got a draw at Anfield. We've got the Etihad coming up. It's a big, big moment. Here's almost like a dress rehearsal to show that in a big moment we don't shrink from it. And I don't think they will, by the way.
Yeah. And the other thing that have you noticed how the atmosphere at the Emirates? That's not a conversation anymore. It's not. No one's talking about. And it, it did dip earlier in the season, which I think is completely natural. Not now. And the club have been quite good, by the way, of identifying a couple of Saturday evening kickoffs in terms of, like 12:30 on a Saturday against Crystal Palace when you've just lost 3 games in a row. Not going to be a great atmosphere. But Newcastle, when you want revenge, at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. Brentford at 5:30 on a Saturday evening when you know it's Liverpool City the next day. Like, the ground's been re-energised. And I think that's good going into Tuesday night because everyone's nice and tuned up. And I think the stadium's going to be really loud. We've beaten Liverpool, we've beaten City, we've got those, like, to your point, the big kind of Emirates moments this year. I think that really sets us up again to, like, really use our home crowd and the energy of our home crowd. And I think the home crowd is nicely warmed up after Saturday night in particular. And we need the crowd on Tuesday night. We need them maybe not to play our football, but to stop Porto playing or not playing, as the case may be, the football that they do or don't want to play. I don't know how double negatives work when it comes to quote unquote anti-football. But yeah, we need the crowd on Tuesday. I think they were there on Saturday. I think since the Liverpool game, that's the atmosphere has really gone up a notch, and that's great. And if we can create another big night, another big moment, all the better.
Just don't get laryngitis again, okay? I think it will be a big night, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Looking forward to hopefully being in the draw for the next round. It's a competition I really want to see us progress in, and I want to measure us against the big European teams because I think we stand up really well to them. Okay, we'll leave it there. Just the hour and 40 minutes for you today, but there will be an instant reaction for the game tomorrow. And maybe something earlier ahead of the game, but it'll just depend timing wise. That could be difficult. Tim's on Twitter at Stoneman. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's already gone, but he'll be back in the immediate future. And we love you. Huge, huge night ahead. Can't wait to share it with everybody. We love you, and we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Porto New.